DealQuest listeners, I am so excited to have Dr. Pat Boulogne on an upcoming episode of DealQuest. Dr. Pat was a chiropractor and is in medical field and helps so many people. And we're going to talk somewhat about what she does, but we're also going to talk about some deals that she did, especially buying and selling a practice. Dr. Pat, tell the listeners a little bit about what we're going to hear on your episode of DealQuest.
Oh, we're going to talk about like how a deal kind of came together, things that were struggles in order to get in order for us to be able to purchase the office in the first place. So there was hurdles to go over, more than a couple of them. And you're going to hear like success stories about how we got there and then how we fostered the practice into a growth spurt that was approximately 15 to 20% each year. And I had the practice for 10 years. Before I sold it. And, how I got to the decision of what kicked me out of the idea of I need to get out of brick and mortar and do something different. And so we'll cover that, and we'll, cover a couple other things that, I did along the way and afterwards that, enhance what I do today, which is coach. I help people strategize their health, and I help people reach the limit of what are upper limits of their health and how to get there without having the stress of trying to figure it out.
Listen, DealQuest listeners, check it out. I mean, in Pat's story and everything that she shared, there were so many lessons that we were able to sort of pull out for folks in any profession looking to do a deal. So definitely check out Dr. Pat's episode on DealQuest.
Thanks.
Do you want your business to grow faster? Are you open to new and out-of-the-box ways to drive revenues and increase value? How do you imagine the most successful entrepreneurs and business leaders double, triple, or expand their businesses tenfold or more? The answer is Deals. This is a weekly podcast featuring conversations with business owners, executives, and leaders as we reveal behind-the-scenes details that give you, our listeners, the confidence to pursue your own deal-driven growth. On the show, we discuss a huge variety of deals, everything from large, complex mergers and acquisitions to smaller deals that you can do even without significant capital. My name is Corey Kupfer, and I've been supporting deal-driven growth for businesses for 35 years as a successful entrepreneur, professional negotiator, and attorney. My goal is to help you strategize, plan for, find, and complete deals that will help your company grow faster. Welcome to the DealQuest Podcast. Let's get started.
Dr. Patricia Boulogne is a certified functional medical practitioner, coach, chiropractor, speaker, and author. She has helped thousands over the last 35 plus years stop adapting their lifestyle to pain and chronic problems by focusing on the whole person. The result is that her clients and patients find out the why and the cause of the problem and identify the starting point. What, why, where, and how to begin their health journey to live longer, better, and healthier. Dr. Boulogne is the founder and principal of Ask Dr. Pat Health Team Network, a company dedicated to skyrocketing your health, lifestyle, and mindset with strategies and programs that make sense and help you feel and help you age gracefully, think, move, and feel better, and live longer and happier. Well, who wouldn't want that, right? Dr. Pat,
I don't
welcome.
know. Thank you.
So folks, with that intro, you might have a question as to the relationship to deals, but hang in there because you're going to find out, because anybody with any background in any profession, this is part of what I talk about on the show, is that any company in any profession at any stage can do deals, and you'll see how Dr. Pat has done deals. So Pat, before we get into a little bit more about what you're doing now and your history with deals, I want to take you back to when you were growing up as a little girl, maybe 8, 10, 12 years old. What did you want to be? Because for a lot of people, what they're doing now is not what they thought they were going to be doing as little kids. But you tell me.
Well, somebody asked me that question yesterday on a podcast, and my aunt, and they asked me, when I was a little girl, when did I know that I wanted to be a doctor? And I said, I probably didn't know I wanted to be a doctor, exactly, but I always played being a doctor. I never was the nurse. I never was the patient, and I never died. And so, and I started doing that when I was 4 years old. And wow. So, and I always was quite interested in science. And and being, well, I used to do these like, silly experiments, like eat ice cream, popsicle, walking down the street in the dead of winter, thinking that if I did that, I wouldn't be, cold, wouldn't be freezing. And I wasn't. It was either a mindset, or it was a placebo or whatever. But, at 8, 9, 10, I was still, I was very science driven then. And, I had a teacher that entered a project of mine into the science fair competition in Michigan at that time. And I came in second place. And, so I had, I was leaning that way, but didn't know that, so to speak.
Got it. Well, it just, the popsicle thing reminded me of something that's sort of the opposite, but probably the same, maybe the same concept. When I was in India, in I think it was 2001, we were in the south of India. It was August. It was 100 degrees, and the Indians, like the British, I guess coming out of colonial rule, drink a lot of hot tea, even when it's 100 degrees. Mm-hmm. And their theory on it, is that actually, because you get the hot inside your body and it more sort of equalizes the gap between your internal body temperature and the outside, that it actually makes you feel cooler. So I think it's maybe it's the same but opposite principle of your. Well,
I can tell you the exact reason why that happens, and the reason why that happens is because your body's hot inside, so your pores are going to open. And Chinese that Chinese principle of that, because I have a background I have a master's in Oriental medicine, is that's why they tell you never to sleep underneath a fan, during really hot and having that wind on you, because then you can, it sets you up for perhaps, a cold and that type of thing. But what happens is the pores actually open, so your body can cool off, but that's the technical reason.
Well, I didn't know the technical reason, but when I had the hot tea in the 100 whatever degree heat, it actually did make me feel cooler. And again, I had the same question on whether it was just psychological or whether there was a physiological reason. It sounds like there is. So interesting. All right. One more question before we get to the present. What was your first deal of any type? It could have been something small when you were a kid, or it could be later. Just anything that comes to mind that you thought of, that, or maybe you think back of it as a deal.
Well, as a kid, even at like that 4 or 5 year old thing, I started the lemonade stand, and out in front of my house, and I went and bought the lemonade, made the lemonade, put my sign up. I put a sign up. I was maybe 3 houses in. There was a big kind of shopping center. And so I would go down to the shopping center, like when people exited, put a sign up, buy lemonade with an arrow going this way, like this. And we were only selling lemonade then like for 3 cents. I mean, it wasn't in the glasses. And so as soon as like we went through 10 of them, I ran in the house and washed them again, and so when people, came, and they always came past my house to go to the main road to go wherever, so it was location. Oh yeah, for sure. So that was the first thing. And I babysat. I negotiated price and, shoveling snow, things like that.
The classic first entrepreneurial ventures, that's such a common story. All right. So before we jump into deals specifically, obviously I gave some of it in your bio, but talk to us just a little bit. Give us a couple of minutes on what you're doing now, and specifically who you serve. Is there a particular demographic that you lean towards? And just give us a little bit more about how you help people.
Well, at present, I am rewriting and upgrading my Stronger Than Medicine course, which is geared towards busy female executives, who need to get more out of their day, need to have more balance, and have a lot more energy at the end of the day, so they can switch from being the working mom to the mom, and get that handled, so their relationships that really matter when they get home, they're 150% present.
Love it. Okay, so that's the current focus. All right, so listen, I sort of set this up a little bit in the intro, talking about really how, and this is one of the fundamental premises of this podcast, is that no matter what business you're in, what size of business, what stage of business, what industry you're in, there's always a deal that can be done. And you have some experience in buying and selling a practice. Why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, well, When when I first started practicing, I wanted to work for somebody who really had, I thought at that time had their practice really together and had all the glue in the right places. And I did. I was able to work for somebody who really had communication down, when to say, what to say, how to say. And so I had a really good teacher for 1 year. And then I was married at the time. So I sent my husband out and we looked at a practice that was on Cape Cod. And I was in Boston and Cambridge working. And so he did the demographic research for around where this practice was at. And the practice was being sold and it was underserved. They saw like maybe 30 patient visits a week. The guy wasn't really busy, that type of thing. And it made sense. Dollars and cents wise made sense. And so we went ahead to try to get this practice. And we went tried to get a conventional loan to get it. And we didn't have enough credit because we were very green behind the ears. And and I can remember this girl, it's now like, Bank of America, but then it was Bank of Boston, sitting behind her desk when I asking for a mere $20,000, and $5,000 buffer for expenses, telling me like, how do you ever expect to make, over $200,000 a year? Because that's what you're going to have to do in order to pay this kind of loan back to us at current rates. And I looked at her, I said, well, if I can't do that, then I like wasted all this time and this energy into this profession. And so at any rate, they turned us down. And so we flipped it around.
So before you go on, I just want to say, like, how many business owners have run into this, right? You start out, you have that classical, entrepreneurial confidence and, that you can build this thing. But what the bank's not looking at your confidence, the bank's looking at, past financials, your personal credit, all those kind of things, which it's difficult to have as an early stage entrepreneur. Okay. So you get turned down, which is something that happens to a lot of folks. But unlike some folks, you don't quit. So what happens next?
My husband and I pivoted, and what we did is we went for an SBA loan. And the guy loved him. He was French. The guy loved him. He had that French accent like me, and and he wanted to help him. He wanted him to have that all-American experience. When you come to America, you can live your dream. And so he helped him piece the pieces of the puzzle that were missing in our proposal to the SBA. And they ended up giving it to us, and they ended up giving us the whole amount that we asked for. So when I went into the bank to pick the money up, so that we could handle the transaction, whoever was the VP at that branch, looked at me and said, well, I'm going to withhold some of this money. And I, excuse me. And I sat there and went, you can't do that. And he said, why? And I said, because I need that money to run this business. And I said, we didn't negotiate 20, we negotiated $25,000 to buy this practice. And I said, I need the whole thing. And I just shut up. And my husband started to say something and I kicked him. and I was sat there and the guy just he goes, okay. So I did business with that bank the whole time I was there. And when I was courted from other banks there for their business, while I was in business there, I always turned them down. I said, you had an opportunity and you blew it. And I said, I go, here I am, and I said, and I have a working relationship and I wanted to buy x-ray equipment, and, they didn't want to, like a bank didn't want to give me the money for that. I just paid cash for it. Just because I knew I was going to be using it. And I knew that we were already in that realm of our sales were, and our bottom line by the end of the year was 6 times the amount of what we bought it for.
Love it. All right. So I want to take people back because there's a few things in what you said that I think are instructive and important. So first of all, I love that with the banker, when they were trying to push back and hold some money back, that you made an affirmative statement and then you went quiet and you kicked your husband to be quiet. People underestimate the power in negotiating of silence, right? And it is such a tendency to want to fill that void. And the truth is, silent. And some people, they learn that as a tactic and they overuse it. It becomes very artificial. But if you use it effectively, right? If you're willing to just stand in what you want and then be silent, other people will become uncomfortable, and it's harder for them. If you're constantly talking, it's easier for them to just keep coming back at you. So that was brilliant. I think it's an underutilized negotiation approach. So I wanted to highlight that. And then the other thing is, it's so interesting to me when I often talk about how there's a natural conflict often between lawyers and business people, because lawyers are over-indexed generally on risk, because when we go to law school, all you do is learn about cases in court. Well, there are no cases in court on things that go well. The only thing that goes to court is when things go bad. So that's something you spend all your time.
True.
And and that's been basically a competitive advantage for me to be able to balance that, the important analysis of risk with the entrepreneurial opportunity. But bankers are that way as well, generally, right? So when you, so it's interesting, and so you was able to convince, get the SBA loan and convince them to give you all the money, and then there was another circumstance in which you just bet on yourself, right? You said, well, all right, I'm just going to pay for cash for this because I know it's going to happen, and that's that entrepreneurial mentality, which I love. All right, so now you sort of gave us a preview of the ending. So now between that, you build up the patient load over time through organic growth, doing great work. However, you built patients. You can talk about that a little bit. And then you, what was the difference? You don't have to share exact numbers, but multiples or whatever, in the value of the practice by the time you sold it.
Well, what I did for the patient portion of that is for the first 4 or 5 months, we were basically on our own. So, and we wanted to go back to France for Christmas. And, my husband was scared that if we went to Christmas, then we wouldn't have any patients when we came back. And I said, don't worry. I said, we're the best chiropractors on Cape Cod. I mean, and I said, they will be there. We're only taking 2.5 weeks off, and everyone has that week off anyway for Christmas. Yep. And so they are, rather be with their families and the such. So when we left at that point in time, when we bought the practice, the guy who we bought it from was seeing 30 patient visits a week. By the time that we were at the end of the year, we were seeing 125.
Wow.
And so, in that short period of time. So what we did is we did talks in the office. Yep. Anybody that I met that looked like they were, I'd walk up to people. It's like, God, how long have you had that shoulder problem? And I said, look, come on in my office, no charge for the consult, and I said, if I have to do x-rays, then we'll do x-rays. And I said, but there'll be a charge for that, but you can come in and find out why you got the problem that you got. And if you like what you hear, then maybe we're the chiropractors for you. And so, and then, so that, and we made goals, so we, we didn't have computers then. So everything we did was on layout sheets. So I managed my practice by statistics. So I looked at, how much room do we have for patients on the books? How many new patients do we want for the week? And then I would go out and I would raindrop everybody back in. So I would go to the health food store. Anytime I was out, I always had 20 cards with me, and I would just have people have conversation. I said, come on and see me. We're new chiropractors in town. And, and I did things for Cape Cod Community College, when they'd had not health fairs, but work fairs, career fairs. I would go have a booth there for women, so women could, have a different profession or think about it. And so I had a lot of women, even at that point in time, our office, men and women. And, I always, and I had kids, and that type of thing. So, the practice kept on growing and kept on growing. We improved the statistics approximately 15 to 20% every year, and then we hit a certain level that because there was only so much physically that we could do. Sure. And then shortly before all that, then I got divorced. So I went from having a practice that we were doing together to working the whole practice on my own. And so when that happened, it mushroomed, and and my first fear was that when he left, because I always thought he had this French accent and, that's what the people skill part of that was. And all of a sudden I had way too many people that I had to really back off, or else my health was going to start, fading. Because I couldn't really keep up with that. So I looked for an associate doctor and another associate doctor. So we expanded in that realm, and I hired the right people for support for me when I was working. and so that I could stay focused and be on purpose, be on, focus and be on intention. So that when people came in, they all used to say, like, how do you remember all this stuff? I lied. I used to just put Post-its
Sure.
on my travel card then, because everything was paper, and I'd say, like, hey, how was that? And they were and people really liked that engagement.
That was your Post-it note CRM system.
Right. That would never float today, but like can't have those type of things, but it worked really well. And I did more things. I did a TV show, was interviewed on a holistic TV show that was like way out there. And, so I did things too, I can talk. Anytime somebody asked me to talk, I talked. I talked in front of the Rotary, the Lions Club. I went to, Better Business had on the Cape had a women's chapter, and a friend of mine brought me there, and it was all women. So she just introduced me as the best woman chiropractor in Cape Cod. And although there's a couple other chiropractors that went, wait, what about me? But it was really great because it was such camaraderie. Like when I went out to go buy vegetables and fish, because Cape Cod's rather small, it would take me an hour to get out of the vegetable stand because people are like, Dr. Pat, what are you eating tonight?
People will come,
And so it was really great. And then I had, and I never said no to anybody. I made sure that if somebody was in pain, if somebody needed to get in, I never said no. I always said yes. So that was one of my mottos in my office. I always say yes.
So let me ask you a question. Did you at any point, did you have it in your mind that you were going to sell the practice at some point, or did that just come up? Was that planned? Oh, I'm going to have an exit. I want to move on to other stuff. Or while you were building it, did you think you were just going to do that for, the foreseeable future, and then an opportunity came up? How did that all come about?
I really didn't have a plan, until I got divorced. And so when I got divorced and I had to buy my husband out of the practice, then I started looking around going, wow, Cape Cod's not the place to be single. And, you had to have the laterality to be able to leave a lot. So that made me work, like really be more concentric with how I worked and how I spent my time and what my additional trainings were and where my certifications were, so that I had a textbook, or my toolkit was, being engorged during that time. And so when I decided to sell the practice, I was actually in California for New Year's Eve. And that New Year's Eve, I was sitting there watching the fireworks and everything. And I just heard a voice go, it's time to get out of there. And so I looked for the right person to market my practice, and look through the stages of what I wanted to go through. And I literally, by the time they finished doing their, like where they were assessing the pluses and the minuses and everything else and what the practice is worth and that type of thing. I had the next thing, I sold it, and I literally sold my practice within, this guy goes, it takes a long time to sell a practice. So when someone came within like maybe 3 months, and bought me out for the price that I wanted to be bought out for, I just went, it's a sign. and I really wanted to be more in Boston. I really wanted to do more one-on-one client work and coaching work, which they didn't call it coaching then, either. So it was just my, I started calling it that. I said, when I went to Boston. So I had people who still called me, who still wanted to come and see me, when they were in Boston. And I didn't do that because I had an agreement not to compete. And I also needed to just take some downtime, too. But, but I bought the practice. I was in like the high, right around the 500s when I sold it. And that's what I walked away with and realized.
So I want to go back a little bit and break down a couple of things. So first of all, what I love is one of the things we talked about is, you did a lot to organically grow the practice to get more patients, right? You talk about all these things you did, from radio shows to talking to people in supermarket to doing, talks to all that kind of stuff, which is great. And this is where the tie-in on, and for a while you were growing the practice with your husband with not an intention to sell it. And then at some point, you realize, so the thing that's always instructive to me, and I talk to people about it, is that, having great organic growth, knowing how to build, a business makes sense whether you're selling it or not. But what it certainly does is if you do sell it, right? I mean, you make more money while you're operating it, but it also increases the value when you sell it, because the more profit you have, the more somebody's going to pay for it. So, excuse me, that definitely happened with you, which I love. And then, like that. And then there's what's fascinating to me always, especially in the entrepreneurial world, and we don't, it's talked about more these days than it used to be, but that sort of tie-in with our own personal life and our vision, not only for business, but for our lives, right? You mentioned, okay, well, it was different. I got divorced. Cape Cod's not a great place to be single. Those things affect small business owners and our decisions on what we want to do with our businesses. And, I think I'm always a believer in that. Why start or own a business as an entrepreneur unless it's creating the lifestyle you want, supporting your life goals, right? Too many people buy themselves a job, and whereas they're excited that they don't have a boss. I mean, I'm not judging anybody, but I know some folks who become self-employed, which is very different than being an entrepreneur, and they feel stuck and they're not achieving their life goals anyway because they're just, working at something, to have the money come in. And you let your business evolve and eventually sold it consistent with your life goals and your desire to evolve, and your evolving life circumstances.
Well, my mentor, when he was still married, his wife was doing some work out in Boston. She called me up and said, "Where do you live?" And I said, "Cape Cod." She said, "How long does it take to get there from wherever she was at?" And she came and stayed for about 4 or 5 days. And after the third day that I worked, when I arrived back at the house, she had a bottle of wine open and 2 glasses. And she said, "Here, have a glass. Here, have another one." And here, have another one. I said, "Why am I the only person drinking?" And she said, "Because," she goes, "I want to explain something to you. Killing yourself for no apparent reason, it doesn't make sense."
Wow.
And so I've always had a very good relationship with both of them. So even as like when, I used to babysit their 4 kids, and he grew a company from his father from the garage, into a multi-zillion-dollar company that did import-export. And so, he that I always was under the watchful eye, but when she said that, she said, "So what are you going to do?" I mean, it's just like, what do you do here after you finish working? So you work all day long and you do what? And so that was a pivotal positioning, because she always planted seeds and then walked away. So when I started thinking about that, I started looking around, and I had a couple friends from Europe come at the same time who said the same thing. They go like, "What's there to do here?" And so like, I guess if there's nothing else to do, you should work. But I didn't want to make my whole life about working. I wanted to make my life about helping sick people get well and well people to maintain their wellness. And I'm going, God, you could do that anywhere. And, you just got to like where you're at, maybe a little bit, and then be able to have some interaction with that. But that was the point that's how that happened.
Love it. So let's delve into just a little, I mean, we don't have to get too far, but a little into the details of the deal, because you said, you walked away with a nice multiple. How was that deal structured? Was there some amount of front payments over time? And talk to me a little bit about how that was set up.
Well, I had a really great attorney, he was also a minister in ethics. And so anytime I would get whipped up about something, he would just say, "Okay, let's think this out," like what's your end goal? But I wanted a significant down payment, and then how that deal ended up working is that I got that down payment, and we pieced the pieces of the puzzle together, like what was going to stay there, what wasn't going to stay there, what art was going to stay, what did he want? And then, he paid me over a period of time. I don't remember if it was 2 or 3 years, something like that.
Yep.
And where my only mistake in that deal is that it was like on December 27th, he paid me off. And I didn't have a clause in with a penalty. that if he paid me off. So my taxes that year were like a nightmare because of that one stupid thing. Because he paid me off by, I think, a year earlier than what we talked about.
He prepaid to get it. Yeah. And makes sense. Okay. But listen, you got paid all your money, which is great. You didn't have any headaches, which is great. And you got to move on.
That was perfect.
To what you were looking to do next. That's fantastic.
Let's take a break from the show for a minute so I can invite you to a new way to determine your deal readiness. I created a fast and easy assessment that will determine exactly how deal ready you are. Once you complete the assessment, I use your responses to identify the obstacles that are holding you back from being a deal-driven growth genius. It's as easy as heading to CoreyKupfer.com/assessment. That's CoreyKupfer.com/assessment and filling out a few multiple choice questions. I'll be checking in after the episode to see what your results are. Now back to the show.
So what is it that, I don't know if you can answer this question because obviously you've had your own experience, but maybe some other. My impression, just over the years, the chiropractors that I've known, when I look at anybody in the medical field and related fields, it was doctors, dentists, chiropractors, ophthalmologists, opticians, like all of the surrounding. Mm-hmm. It seems to me like chiropractors tend to, on average, be way more sort of entrepreneurial than I've seen a lot of other folks in and around the medical field. Do you find that? And is my impression right? And if so, do you have any thoughts on why?
Oh, I know why. When I went out and I started becoming a chiropractor, I didn't have any referral system. Medical doctors have a referral system. A lot of them are under the umbrella of some hospital, some, partnership and that type of thing. So they get referrals and they do a lot of referrals within. I didn't have that. So, and when I started working as a chiropractor on Cape Cod, you were the odd man out, and not until I met a neurologist who liked my husband. They were someplace conversing. He goes, "Oh, what do you do? What do you do?" Then we went out to dinner with him and then having, better communication with him. So he goes, "Yeah, I'll refer you some people," and so that's a big difference. Now you have, chiropractic is more mainstream, yes. And they also have the ability to be in hospitals and things like that. But at that point in time, you didn't have that. So you really had to hustle, and think about how many patients do I need to see a week in order for me to meet my bills? And then when I hit that, I had fun. Everything else was it was fun and above and beyond that. But that's the reason for that too. And also, chiropractors, they say 1 in 4 fail. That's the statistic that I'm aware of. It could be different from the last time I ever checked that. So, and something that I've done since I sold my practice is I've covered practices for other doctors. And so I can go off into an office and I can CSI it in half hour. And I can look at, say, what's working, what's not working in this office, who's got to go, because the biggest component in a chiropractic office, or even in a functional medicine doctor's office, or, at any office, is the front desk people. So many people tell me that they left a chiropractor or left a medical doctor because they couldn't stand the people at the front desk, 100%, yeah. And so if you're sitting there, it's just when I gave a talk out in California in Burlingame to a functional medicine forum. And the thing I said, I labeled my talk, "My doctor just gets me." I just love my doctor. My doctor just gets me. I go, "How many people in this room?" There's 40, 50 people in the room. "How many of you people in here have ever heard your patient say that to you?" And people 3 people raised their hand.
Right.
And so, and I said, I go, "You must not be medical doctors." And they were because they could be medical doctors as functional medicine. That's the primary way to get in, and they weren't. So, out of those 3 people, and they were, one guy's a chiropractor, and he goes, "My patients say that all the time." And I said, "So if you got to have that person, you have to be a human being, and be a person, but you have to be a human being first when you're dealing with people in a chiropractic office. That sets the tone for everything else that happens. And you've got to have people who are on the same page as you." And I always had a rule in my office too, that whoever was my front desk person, they needed to get adjusted, because they had to be able to explain what that looked like to somebody who was coming in. and they had to be my ears, so people sometimes, that post-it note thing, would come in and they would say like, oh, she's going to have, a new member in the family. And they were always like, oh my God, you're back here. How do you know that? It's Susan. Susan was my front desk person. But there's that, but that's the reason why, like it, and a lot of people think, they're going to do, I helped a doctor, who to sort some things out in his office a couple of years ago. And, and the thing that he neglected to do is create enough activity and money for marketing. You have people, if you're going someplace where nobody knows you, you have to get out in the community. You have to look for community events. You have to go out and oh, you can touch my face. you can touch me, feel me. I'm here. And this is where you can find me during the daytime. And so that's really essential of getting, and being really interactive in that way.
Love it. Love it. Yeah. And that makes sense to me about the chiropractors. It's just something that I've noticed over the years. Not all of them, but a higher percentage of them tend to be much more entrepreneurial.
Uh-huh. Well, I've looked at practices, with a curiosity to see, as a lot of people are going cash and they're not involved in insurance anymore. And, so I looked at practices that had been for sale, and sometimes the numbers just don't work. Like, where do you expect someone to get? You have a practice that's booming and you're not going to leave. You've got to move. You've got to get out of this area. You have to be willing to pick up, leave, or else it's not worth someone buying your practice because that name still sticks with you. And, you have to be, location. It was in a beautiful location. The doctor who was selling the practice lives in that location. He had another practice someplace else that was close by. But it was a $20 adventure to come across the bridge every time you came. So who you're going to draw from that, unless, it's like, unless you made some agreement with the state, which isn't going to happen, then you had that, that you'd be always struggling, even though the stats for that area are, they had enough population for it, but you didn't have the drive of what, people demographically did in that, because they usually left. They went over to the other side during the daytime when they were working.
Got it. Got it. Interesting. So any other, just whether it was from that buying, selling, anything you've done in the future, any other just sort of lessons that, in terms of, listen, you bought well, you sold well, and in that, and obviously you did, it's not like you bought something and flipped it. You bought something, did a lot of work to build it, and then sold it. So any lessons from that, or were there any? You gave us one mistake in terms of not preventing the prepay and getting hit on taxes. But any more general lessons you learned on the positive or negative side in terms of deals, either through that or any?
Well, the other thing, and especially in a service-related industry like chiropractic, I had a great staff, and the guy who did all my muscle work and all my PT stuff came and leaned on the counter with me. I loved him because I could tell him to do something once, and then he would do it. And I used to tell his wife, I go, "Oh my God!" I go, "What a prize he is!" You don't have to have the conversation twice. But he just leaned against the counter and he said, "Dr. Pat, he's not you." And he goes, and his only way he's going to succeed is because you're leaving. I was leaving Cape Cod and going to Boston, and. So, and he didn't have and one of my rules for selling my practice, because I wanted to leave people in very good hands, is somebody had to have the clinical skills. They had to have, hands-on experience for so many years, because you didn't want to turn that over to someone who just came out of school, even if they had the money. I wouldn't do that. But the guy who bought it didn't have the social skills. He wasn't as sharp on that, because I could talk. I'm from Michigan. We can talk to anybody about anything and not have to go someplace. It's just, a conversation. And there's a couple times when he walked in on a conversation I was having with somebody and he had no clue how to enter the conversation. Or make it, his sense of humor was, too guarded. And and people used to ask me all the time when I was on Cape Cod, are you from New York? and you have to have the energy. You have to have energy to be with people. And you have to have a way and lessons like not to let somebody suck your energy away from you when you're going from patient to patient to patient and keeping it all straight. And so there was, when someone's going to do a deal, that they have the welfare of someone's health and well-being going forward, they have to give consideration to the style of person who they're willing to sell the practice to. Because I was willing not to sell it. If I didn't find somebody, I was willing not to sell it, and stay there longer. And I had an exit plan for that, where I have a chiropractor who my patients liked, who was local, would come in when I went on vacation for 2 or 3 weeks, and he would come in and adjust my patients, and I was thinking, my thought process in the back said, if this doesn't, work with this guy, I was going to approach him about coming in and posturing him to sell my business out each year at a certain percentage. So he really didn't have any outlay of money.
Yeah. So there's a few things in that I love that I want to break down. I mean, one, you talked about like getting the right buyer, right? Because listen, obviously, I think from, what I gather, I'm sure part of that is that you want to make sure, you're in a care profession, you care about your patients. You want to make sure they're well taken care of going forward, even though you're not going to be there. But the other thing is, practically, if they're not successful, especially on a deal, which is most deals, you got back end money. Okay, you're not going to get paid, right? If they fail. So
absolutely.
So that's really important. Finding the right buyer, and you gave some examples on some of the criteria, and I'm sure you had others of the right buyer. And then the other thing is, having a plan B, which was effectively an internal succession, something we've talked about on this podcast, where you say, hey, I'm going to bring somebody in, and instead of selling to the outside, I'm going to sell it internally over a period of time. Right, that's an internal succession deal as opposed to an external sale. So that was a backup plan, which is great. And then the other thing I heard you say, which is amazing, is because it's actually one of the 3 fundamental tenets I talk about in my Authentic Negotiating book, which is you said, well, I didn't have to sell. So you were I talk about clarity, detachment, and equilibrium. You were detached from the outcome, meaning that if you got the right deal, you were going to do it. If not, you were in no rush. You weren't desperate. You had a plan B. You didn't have to sell. So you can make an objective decision. So I love, there's several things in what you said, that I wanted to break down, and I love that. It's, when you can be detached from from a deal and have alternatives, you're in such a strong position.
Yep. I took a negotiating class at Harvard in their extension school after I sold my practice. And like all those things that, you've talked about and we mentioned so far, it was the guy who, I don't remember the author's name, but the guy who taught the course was the guy who was the person who wrote the book, Getting to Yes.
Yeah. So was it William Ury, or was it, there were a couple of them that co-authored that. William, I know, I've had, he's one of the co-authors. I've had the pleasure of spending some time with him, including walking the Abraham path in Israel and Palestine, which is, and he does major international negotiations. And but so he was one of there were several authors of that book, and they're all in the Harvard Project on Negotiating, whatever. They do great work.
Yeah, it was really great, and I also had a mentor during that class who I used to meet and say, like, hey, this is what our simulation is today. And I always got to be like I was the main negotiator or the CEO, and I was selling the little widgets and things like this. And he gave me some posturing things to do, where after my final exam going out, the teacher said, he goes, who told you to do that? So he happened to know the guy, and I said, do you ever negotiate with him? He said, no. He goes, but that's like, he goes, you did a great job. Because I just got up and said, time to caucus. And I didn't tell my people that I was going to do that. And they all looked at me with a state of shock, and some girls said, you remind me of my mother. I hate my mother. Oh, wow. when we were in that simulation, and so she said, like, I had never thought about, like, when you're dealing with, when you're in negotiation, the style of person who, like, like sometimes and being proactive, you're reactive, and you don't understand why you're being reactive, and I said, well, there you have it, because when you did that, then they lose their power in the negotiating aspects of that, or what they bring to the table.
Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of people have read, but if you haven't, and there are some, more recent books, in addition to mine that that are great negotiating books, but Getting to Yes is such a classic book. It's Roger Fisher and William Ury, were the two authors. William, I've had the pleasure to meet, as I said. Classic negotiating book. William had about let's see, my book came out 3 years ago. I think his book came out around the same time. He had a follow up. I mean, he's done several, but he had. I think it's his most recent one. I don't know if he's come up with anything since, which he did Getting to Yes with Yourself, where he added another element to it, which is actually consistent with a lot of stuff I talk about, which is the internal journey of negotiation. So it's not just the external and relationship one, but like some of the things you need to do, internally to make sure that you're in good shape. So yeah, I mean, I love their work, and obviously Harvard's got a great program on negotiating. So, and it sounds like you. Not only did you learn that, but you had natural instincts where you were doing some of those things even before you came in.
I know. I was really shocked. It's just like, I must have I don't know. And, and the other thing I did in my office that I didn't mention before, and I thought about it and I spaced out, is that, we hired a management team.
Okay.
And like a chiropractic management group. So that, because what I wanted to do, and the reason why I did that is that I wanted to get all the pieces of the puzzle together, the forms, the writing, what the procedures were for the office and how to write them up and things like that. So that was very, very useful, at that time. And it was also useful because my husband was French and he's going, I'm not paying that much in taxes. I go, there's a couple things that happen here. You live, you die, and you pay taxes in the United States. And I said, so you're not walking away like, you've got to handle the business aspect of this. And then after that, you can do whatever you want to do, but so it was really helpful to have that management group in there because that was the buffer tool to be able to get things done and that type of stuff. That was smart.
Yeah, that makes sense. That totally makes sense. All right. Well, listen, I could talk to you for a long, long time, but we are, limited in time coming to the end of the podcast here. I want, before I ask you my final question, I want to give you an opportunity to let folks know the best place to find out more about the things that you're involved in. And so any kind of, websites or other things that you want, please let them know where they can find you.
Well, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm Dr. Pat Boulogne, and I have a Facebook page. I have more presence on LinkedIn, and I like interacting with people on that platform better. My website is healthteamnetwork.com, and it's a good way to kind of take a peek at what I'm doing. I'm reformatting that website and updating that also right now, so there's more current information. And like I said, I'm rewriting my Stronger Than Medicine course for female executives who want to get more out of their day, and be able to focus on their health, focus on balance, and still get the productivity and hit the mark that they want to hit, and also be at home too. And I have my book that I wrote that came out just before the pandemic, called Why Are You Sick, Fat, and Tired? And it's a guidebook and workbook, and an advocating tool to find out what your health snapshot is right now. So you can see what your weakest link is. You can see where to start your health journey. You can see where to spend time, money, and energy on your health, so that, because health, if you don't have your health, you can't do anything. You can't do your job. 100%. You can't be the CEO. You can't be the executive, as there's always something wearing and tearing at you. So it really helps you focus on what really matters, and what, and also gives you an opportunity to invest in your best asset, which is you.
Love it.
Yeah.
So folks, definitely check that out. All of those links and sites will be in the show notes. So if you're driving or, you didn't catch them, don't worry about it. Check it out in the show notes. You'll know where to reach out to Dr. Pat. So Pat, the final question that I always ask on the podcast is, freedom is my highest ideal. And for me, it means freedom for everybody from oppression in the world to the reason why I'm an entrepreneur and, I build my business and don't have a boss. What is, and it's fun. I don't want to lead the witness here, so to speak, but I just sort of made a connection in my own mind between health and freedom, right? That is obvious to me based upon what you said. But in any case, I should have even said that because I like to get pure answers, but it was a click for me, wow, not that I haven't thought about this before, but how could you have freedom if you're not healthy, right? I mean, that's like a core thing. But in any case, what does freedom mean to you in your life and business?
Well, I was going to tie that in, that aspect of that health part.
No surprise.
Because you really can't, when I look at freedom, I wanted to have the ability, the lateral ability to be where I want to be and to travel when I want to travel. Yeah. And I want to be able to, help who I want to help. And so if I have that level of freedom financially, then I can make decisions about exactly like, where to live, how to live, what to say, and how I can pro bono some of my stuff out to people who need it and can't afford it. And so, that's that part of that freedom. The other part of freedom is I will tell you, as when I worked, and I do this all the time, when I go to sleep at night, I sleep. Yeah. Sleep is such a golden tool to restore, revitalize, and that freedom to be able to let my mind go so that it does not control me, is huge. And so, because that lets me have the wherewithal to like adapt, in other arenas, personally and professionally. And I never, I'm two words that people use to describe me is I'm persistent, resourceful, and resilient. 3 words. And I always think like, okay, say this happened. What did I learn? How do you pivot? How do you get over there? And I look at it as what my goals are. And I love to have that mindset that, nothing can stop me. And that's my freedom.
Love it. Yeah. Dr. Pat, thank you so much for being an amazing guest on the DealQuest podcast.
Thank you. I love being here. This is so wonderful.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of DealQuest, where we help you understand how deal-driven growth can be your ticket to freedom. I want to invite you to a unique way to tap into the wisdom and experience of the DealQuest community. Join the DealQuest Deal Den Zoom calls, a free monthly 90-minute mastermind. In the mastermind, we address all the challenges you may be facing and help support you with the opportunities that may arise in terms of deal-driven growth. You will get input not only from me, but all the members on the call will collaborate and serve each other in a mastermind format. To sign up for the free mastermind, go to www.corykupfer.com/dealden. That's corykupfer.com/dealden. I'll see you there. I'm Corey Kupfer. Until next week, wishing you the freedom and financial prosperity that I know your DealQuest will bring.